Hi there everybody, Amanda Gordon and welcome back to Skin School. Today we are covering the epidermis of the skin, which is the very top layer of skin that we can all see and touch. Now, the epidermis has four main functions. The first is for actual physical protection of the body. The second is immune protection. The third is protection from ultraviolet light from the sun that, of course, can cause skin cancers. And the fourth is the production of new skin cells. Really, the epidermis serves as our body's very first protection against the outside environment. It prevents toxins and bacteria from getting into our bodies, as well as helps to keep moisture from leaving our bodies and keep us nice and hydrated. Now, since there's no direct blood supply to the epidermis itself, it relies on the underlying layer, the dermis, which houses our blood vessels and all the other organelles, to supply it with nutrients and oxygen, and also for waste disposal. Now, the thickness of the skin on certain areas of the body is dependent upon how much impact that area of the body receives. Now, the soles of the feet and the palms of the hands, for example, require a much thicker layer of epidermis because they're used a lot more than, say, the eyelids, which have the thinnest layer of epidermis on the entire body. Now, all of the skin cells that we have are made up of stratified squamous epithelial cells. Basically, this means they're stratified, so they are layered, squamous being the type of skin cell that they are, and epithelial meaning the outermost layer of a tissue on any particular organ. So, for example, when you hear the term squamous cell carcinoma, you know that we're talking about a particular type of skin cancer. Now, there are 5 layers. These 5 layers, or stratums, are called basal, spinosum, granulosum, lucetum, and corneum. Let's start off by taking a look at the stratum basal, which, as you can see here, is the very bottommost layer of the epidermis. Now, the stratum basal is also commonly referred to as the stratum germinativum, which is a word that basically means to begin new growth. And this is the deepest layer of the epidermis, and it is attached to the dermal layer through a series of intertwining collagen fibers, and we know this as the basement membrane. So basically, the stratum basal has 2 main functions. The first one is to attach the epidermis to the dermis, and the second one is the formation of new skin cells. We also find the beginning of keratinocytes in this layer of the skin. Now, keratinocytes are the most common cell we find in the epidermis, and they are cells that are filled with keratin, which is a hardening protein. As these hardened cells start to move up through the layers of the epidermis, they start to flatten out and lose their nucleus. Once they reach the very top layer of the skin, which is the stratum corneum, they're considered corneocytes, and this is the phase of the life cycle where they die and eventually shed off the surface. Now, there are 2 other types of specialty cells in the basal layer of the epidermis. The first one is called a Merkel cell, and this cell is responsible for the perception of very gentle touch. The second type of specialized cell within the basal layer is called a melanocyte. Now, these are the cells that are responsible for producing melanin, or pigment. Depending on how much pigment you naturally produce depends on your individual skin color. These melanocytes also help to produce pigment in an effort to protect our bodies from the UV rays that come from sunlight that can damage the DNA in our cells, causing different types of skin cancer. Working our way up from the stratum basal, we come to the stratum spinosum, pictured here. Now, in this layer, the skin cells take on kind of a spiny shape, hence the name spinosum. Its main function is to allow the new skin cells to mature, and it's partly responsible for the strength and flexibility of our skin. Now, let's talk about Langerhans cells. These are specialized cells that we start to see forming in this layer of the epidermis. And these cells basically are designed to help detect foreign substances and stop them from invading the body. Next layer up, we come to the stratum granulosum, pictured here. Now, this is a really thin layer of skin And in this layer, the cells actually start to lose their nuclei and all of their organelles and start to flatten out and keratinize. As these cells start to flatten out and die, they start to form little granules, sometimes called lamellar granules or keratohalin granules. And that's also one of the reasons why it's called the stratum granulosum. In this layer, the proteins from the keratin help the skin cells to start binding together. Now, these granules also contain lipids, which is basically a little fatty substance that helps to bind the skin cells together and create a waterproof barrier. Next up, we come to the thinnest layer of the epidermis called the stratum lucetum. Now, this is the thinnest layer of the epidermis. It's pretty much translucent, and it is responsible for giving the skin its ability to stretch and be flexible. Now, the really unique thing about this particular layer is it is only found on the soles of the feet, the palms of the hands, and the tips of our fingers. Finally, we come to the stratum corneum. It's here that the skin cells come to the end of their life cycle and shed off the surface. So yes, we finally come to the stratum corneum, which is the outermost layer of our epidermis, the layer that we can all see and touch. Now at this point, the cells have lost all of their organelles, they've died, they've hardened and flattened out, and they're getting ready to shed off the surface of our skin. Now the stratum corneum can really be compared to a brick wall at this point. If you consider the bricks to be our skin cells and the mortar that holds those bricks together to be the lipids, it's really something that makes the skin impenetrable to foreign invaders and bacteria and viruses and anything else that might be trying to come into our bodies. Now, this brick wall structure helps to prevent water loss. And the lipids in the mortar of the bricks actually helps to maintain our skin's hydration, firmness, and smoothness. All right, everybody, that's it. That is the basic anatomy of our epidermis. Now, some of the structures that you heard about and some of the terms that you heard about, we are going to be doing separate videos on all of those things. For example, the melanocytes that are responsible for the pigment of our skin. We're going to do a separate video on that, as well as many of the other things, to get a little bit deeper into those, a little more specific, so you have a better understanding of how everything works as a cohesive unit. So make sure you leave your comments. If you have any questions, comment. I'm happy to answer those questions for you, and as well as let me know what other videos that you would like for me to do if you have specific areas of interest or concern about your own skin. Thanks for attending Skin School. I'm Amanda Gordon. See you next time.